Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us here this afternoon to say goodbye and to celebrate the life of James Eben Burgess Stuart, or Jim, as he was known to just about everybody. And I like to point out it's not the EW, it's the Royal Stuart as well. An honest man here lies at rest, ere God with his image blessed, a friend of man, a friend of truth, a friend of age, a friend of youth. Few hearts like his with virtue warmed, few heads with knowledge so informed. If there's another world, he lives in bliss. If there is none, he made the best of this. Those are the words of Robert Burns, writing an epitaph to a very dear old friend. And I think they're just so suitable as a first reading at this funeral, because Jim was all of the things that Burn describes in that verse, and an awful lot more. For a start, how today do you do justice to a man like Jim Stewart? A man who would do anything for anybody. A loving husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. The point was, on the surface, he could be described as an ordinary bloke. But to those who knew him, he was quite extraordinary. He was born in Longside, Peterhead. He was the focal point of his family. In some ways, with wife Di, they were the glue that held things together. Jim was 79 on his birthday this past April, which is a good age, but as always, not quite long enough. During his life, he saw the most extraordinary changes in this world. His dad, Ebenezer Stewart, was a prison officer, and by the way, what a great name for a prison officer. And his mum, Shona, she was a housewife, and they brought up two boys, of which Jim was the younger. His older brother, Johnny, would later in life introduce Jim to motocross. And as you all know, motocross was a huge part of Jim's life. It was almost a religion. But we'll talk more about that later. The family moved to Glasgow when Jim was still very young, because his dad became a prison officer at the notorious Berlin jail. The family later returned to Peterhead, where Ebenezer was appointed the chief prison officer. Now, everyone knew Jim from a different perspective. He was a loving husband and a devoted father. He was so proud of his two daughters, Elaine and Sandra. And a loving and caring father-in-law as well to Mike and Tony. He was also a proud granddad and a good granddad to Liam, Ashley, Aidan, Tony and Seb. And of course, the grandchildren's partners, Sarah, Kirsten and Becky. He was also a great-granddad to Hunter. Now, that's not a bad legacy at all. And none of you would be here if it wasn't for him. Well, for him and Di. For those whose life he touched in other ways, he was a really honest, true, and supportive friend. His death will have left a huge gap in so many lives, and that can never be refilled. But he wouldn't want to be remembered in sadness, but rather in love, with a smile, with a laugh, and thoughts of all the good and happy times in his life, and there were heaps and heaps of those. So don't think of him in terms of what you've lost, but try to remember everything that you gained from his life and learn from it. We've come to this beautiful place set in the Grampian foothills to mark the end of his life. Now, a funeral always marks an ending, and it's never an easy time for those who are left to mourn. But his memory must live on, and it's up to all of you to make sure that happens. As we go through life, of course, we forget that an ending might just be approaching. Consequently, when it arrives, you don't have to feel off kilter. Endings are strange. They leave us bereft, ill at ease, and asking an awful lot of questions. For instance, when you look back on a relationship, be it with a family member or a friend, and how that relationship and friendship, especially friendship, develops over many years, there's no thought of how or when it will actually ever end. But quietly, and inevitably the end approaches. And it's how we deal with it that's important. So look at it this way. Before the ending, there has to be a beginning and a middle. And it's that we're here to celebrate and concentrate on today. This is just a ritual. It's something that we do to mark the end of the journey of life. But the ritual does have meaning and spirituality, irrespective of personal belief. There's spirituality because in between being born and facing the end of life, there's a great big adventure called living. And each person in turn will see life in a different way and live it in a different way, but no matter how they live that life, the spirituality of the individual is caught up and passed on to everybody else. And it's that affects us all. It's the same with Jim. His spirit reached out to everybody he encountered. Now, a funeral really should do three things. It enables everyone to say farewell. That's the first thing. The second is to give an account of the quality and the character of the deceased, and we'll certainly do that today. When I went to see the family, there was so much information, and we had a big laugh. We had a great laugh and a good time talking about him. But the third thing, and the most important thing of all, is to allow everyone to articulate their love, the affection and the regard in which Jim was held by each and every one of you. So hopefully we will do him proud. I'm going to take a wee glass of water because this is not the shortest of eulogies. Not how did he die, but how did he live? Not what did he gain, but what did he give? These are the units that measure the worth of a man as a man, regardless of birth. Not what was his church, nor what was his creed, but had he befriended those really in need? Was he ever ready with words of good cheer to bring back a smile, to banish a tear? Not what did the sketch in the newspaper say, but how many were sorry that he passed away. Not how did he die, but how did he live? Not what did he gain, but what did he give? Those are really poignant words. And we'll hear in this eulogy just how much he did give. Jim came into the world at home on the 20th of April 1942, right in the middle of the Second World War. His was a home birth, and for the newborn, he came into a settled family. Dad, as I said, was a prison officer, so he had a good job, and his mum was a housewife, raising Jim and his older brother. Although Jim had grown up during the war, most of the war years passed really unnoticed. He was too young to know what was going on. Schooling was in Glasgow. He was what you would politely call a reluctant scholar. That's teacher speak for a bloody pest. The world of English essays and maths were not for him. He was definitely the joker of the class. To give you a wee bit of an example, and I'm not sure if this actually happened on a school trip. I hope it did, because if it didn't, then he was an adult when he did it. But he was in France, in Paris, and he peed off the top of the Eiffel Tower. All I can say is liberté, égalité, and heeds uppity. At an early age, his brother Johnny introduced him to the world of motocross, which led to his father forming the Peterhead Motorcycle Club, which was the start of Jim and his long career in motocross. Sadly, Jim's dad died when Jim was in his early 20s, and that must have had a profound effect on a young man. Ebenezer would have been so proud of his son had he lived long enough to see all that he achieved. Jim's first bike was a Dot, and after racing successfully in this country for a few years, Jim decided to up sticks and move south of the border. He moved around quite a lot, but ended up in London. He worked for Comerfords, based in Thames Ditton. At that time, he was racing a Greaves Griffin. He was a bit of a daredevil, which at times got him into bother. I mean, there was one occasion when he fell through a glass roof when he was climbing it trying to steal apples. Then he changed employer. He worked for Eric Cheney, the motorcycle racer designer, who was known as one of the best motorcycle frame designers of his time. While Jim was with Eric, he rode the Cheney BSA. The early 70s took Jim to France, where he raced, earning himself the name the Flying Scotsman. On Christmas Eve in 1974, Jim and his mate Geordie Crichton and Jimmy Aird were invited to visit Rhodesia by the Bogwheelers Motorcycle Club. They raced in both Rhodesia and South Africa, and that was for a month before returning home. While Jim was visiting Rhodesia, Rob and Rose Rushford laid on a welcome barbecue for all the Scottish riders. Jim thought the party, of course, needed a bit of livening up, bearing in mind he was always the life and soul of a party. So he decided and took it upon himself to throw absolutely everybody in the pool, of course, ending up in the pool himself. Everybody must have enjoyed Jim and the Scottish Riders Company because they were invited to make a return journey in 1977 for a month. However, this time, Jim decided to stay put for an extra few months. Now, let's just backtrack a wee bit. This is an important point. Jim was attending the London Motorcycle Show in 1974, and that's where he met the lady who he was destined to share the rest of his life with. Di was Brian Leask, the Husqvarna dealer's secretary. Jim was employed and rode for that company for a few years. He always said that he only got together with Di because she liked motorbikes. Well, I actually think there was probably a little bit more than that. Maybe it was the sexy white boots that Di would wear, or the mauve fur coat, maybe. Who can guess? The pair were married in March 1976, a marriage which lasted 45 years. You get less for murder. This was a new chapter in James's life, and Jim and Di's daughter Elaine moved to Stynhaven. The family was completed in 1977 with the arrival of Sandra. Jim, and I quote, was the perfect dad. Always supportive, always there for the bairns. He encouraged them to enjoy the great outdoors and would take them and all their friends for long walks in the woods. Didn't care a fig about health and safety. Abdi was piled into the back of a van and off they went. There was one occasion when he made them all stand in a long line, hand in hand. Then he touched an electric fence, sending shocks right through their bodies. Nowadays, of course, you'd be reported to the cruelty for that. But they're what are all good and cherished memories of childhood. I'm now going to ask Eileen to come up and read a tribute to her dad. And I'm here at your back if you need me. Okay.
Well, Jimbo, our dad, husband, granddad and great-granddad, our hero. You fought to the bitter end, still listening to your crap music and surrounded in love by us all. What can I say? There are no words to describe the life you have given us all as a family. The Flying Scotsman, they used to call you, who in 1974 met my mum at the London Bike Show. Beautiful blonde thing in white stiletto boots, you said. What you didn't know was that there was a beautiful blonde 2-year-old at home that come with the package. Well, that was me. Motocross was your life, racing all over the world. When you asked Mum to marry you, you told her it had to happen during the week in between 2 scrambles down south, as you were not going down from Scotland especially to marry her. This passion for bikes shaped our lives. When my little sis Sandra came along, we used to be packed up in the van on a Friday night to travel the length and breadth of the country. We would never have had this any other way. When your grandsons came along, Liam, Ashley and Aidan, you were thrilled to have boys in the house so you could teach them all about motocross as well. We used to love the weekends when the 4 of you all raced. When the twinks, Seb and Tony, and grandson Hunter came along, great-grandson, came along, this completed your family of boys, with Seb now also having a bike. These are the memories our family will never forget. We are very fortunate to have met such a lovely motocross family who, along with us, will respect you forever. The love and support from each and every one of you has been awesome. When this horrible disease joined our family in October 2019, you took every step in your stride saying, if I die tomorrow, I'm ready. I've had a bloody fantastic life racing all over the world. Today, old Jimbo, the Flying Scotsman, you've gained your old wings. We say farewell, not goodbye, as you will be in our hearts forever. Fly high, old boy. A special dad is hard to find. You, Dad, we are keeping in our minds. We wished you could have stayed forever, but we will never forget you, oh, not ever. If dreams weren't dreams and dreams came true, we wouldn't be here, we'd be with you. Distance is one thing that keeps us apart, but Dad, you will always remain in our hearts. A special smile, a special face, a special someone we can't replace. We love you and always will. You filled a space that no one else could ever fulfill.
That deserves a round of applause. Now, most weekends, of course, involve motocross, and his love of motocross is being kept alive with his son-in-law, Tony, grandson, Ashley, along with 7-year-old grandson, Seb, who's now training on his 65cc. As I said, it's so clear Jim is the focal point of his family. But his boxers were also part of his family, and that's not the type that you wear. It's the dogs. He loved Buster and Brutus, and of course Sandra's dog, Bruno. He was a loving grandfather and great-grandfather and a good supportive friend. Although, if you were about for too long and not talking about bikes, he would politely tell you it's time to bugger off now. He had a shop in Stonehaven where everyone went to socialise and talk bikes. It was not financially successful, but it was mighty popular. We all know Jim was well respected and a loved man throughout his entire life. He was certainly a larger-than-life character. His favourite greeting was, "How the hell are you?" There are so many stories which can be told. For instance, Gordon Mackenzie, an old friend from Canada, remembers finding Jim a tractor tyre and attempting to roll it down the sand dunes into the sea with Jim inside it. Jim never made it to the sea, but he nearly killed himself. There was another time Jim turned up at the gym, just having left the West End pub, wearing an old-style flying suit so that he would sweat, presumably to lose weight. All he did was end up stinking like a pig. Everyone Jim knew has lasting memories. Jim's family have received so many cards and letters from so many friends and colleagues, and this is just one of the messages. Jim left an impression on everyone that met him, and the world is the sound of police knowing that we will never see him riding a local track near any of us. He introduced himself to me and my dad at the first ever race at Stumble Park in Kemney. Made me feel part of the motocross family from day one. Jim was an amazingly happy and contented man. He accepted his illness with amazing dignity. He never complained. He was happy sitting in his chair at home, listening to his crap music, as Di would put it. He remained positive right to the end. He was thankful for his life and for everyone who shared it with him. He once said, "I've never been lonely. I don't know the meaning of lonely." And this is because those who truly mattered to Jim were always there, just as he had always been there for all of you. He enjoyed his Sunday trips out in the car with his chauffeur, Mike. His favourite route was past Dunnottar Castle, down the Bervie Braes, up to the golf course, and ending up down at the harbour. His journey to the heights of exhilaration sometimes met with the messiest of experiences, like the time in his late 50s when he fell off his bike in Stonehaven and landed in Dogshite. But he never lost his sense of humour. He had amazing memories of a life that he lived his way. His journey was an exciting one, and really exciting for everyone who took the journey with him. The Flying Scotsman, the husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, the friend to so many, is gone, and this world is a much less colourful place without him. Now we're going to take, as we get towards the end of this celebration of his life, we're going to take just a few minutes to reflect. A chance for you to digest what you've heard, a chance to recall your own memories, a chance maybe to think silently, because it'll be time to say farewell shortly. It may be difficult, but it's important. And I hope what we've just touched on today gives you some comfort.
Traveled and much have I seen, dark distant mountains with valleys of green, past painted deserts, the sun sets on fire as he carries me home to the Mull of Kintyre. Oh, mist rolling in from the sea, my desire is always to be here, oh, Mull of Kintyre.
Jim leaves behind a grieving family, but he wouldn't want you to grieve for too long. Take inspiration from his life, keep his memory alive so that you can pass it down the generations. And in doing that, you'll give him immortality because he'll live forever here in your hearts. I think A.A. Milne sums it up in this short verse. If ever there is tomorrow, when we're not together, there is something you must always remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. But the most important thing is, even if we're apart, I'll always be with you. We've now come to the point in our service where we're going to say our final goodbye. If you would please stand for the committal. Jim Stuart, tenderly and reverently, we send you on your final journey. Grateful for the life that you shared and for all that life has meant to every one of your family and friends. Your life we honour, your departure we accept, your memory we cherish. We are happy and grateful for your life and for the privilege of sharing it with you. To everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose on earth, a time to be born and a time to die. Here in this final act in sorrow but without fear, in love and in the knowledge that you are now at rest, we say farewell. Rest now at the end of your days, your work is done. Rest in the hearts and the minds of all who loved you. May they find peace, comfort and richness in your example. May they find support in the love for one another. And may they all find strength in their hearts through their love for you. We can bless each day that we live and live it to the full in honour of life itself and in honour of Jim. Please be seated. Jim was a special person. His legacy comes in many forms, but most importantly, it's all of you. For those he leaves behind, closure will take time, acceptance will come, and it will come as you move forward without him. But he'll always be in the background, in the wind as you walk in the hills, and the sights and the sounds, no matter where you are. There's one thing that I have to say, and that's on behalf of the family, and especially the girls. It's a huge thank you to their mum. Di loved Jim so much, and she worked tirelessly to make sure that he was able to be at home. That was important. And your entire family owe you a great debt of gratitude. To close today's service, I'm going to read a beautiful poem. It's called The Joy of Living. Farewell the northern hills, the mountains, the heather-carpeted moorland. Farewell the town and its harbour sitting in the shadow of the old castle. Farewell my house. Farewell my loving family and the good woman who shared them. Now I'll rev up and hit the road, feeling the tempered air like wine rush to my brain and lift my soul, and I'll give thanks for the joy of living. When I'm gone, take me to a magical place, familiar to me, and when you're ready, scatter me to the wind, so that I'll be part of all you see and the air you breathe. I'll be part of the grass beneath your feet and the blue sky which stretches to the horizon. And as the dew hangs like diamonds on the thistle, I'll ride the gentle wind that blows through your hair, reminding you of how we shared the joy of living. Rest in peace, Jim.